Hi everybody, my name is Erin. I'm from Push. I wanted to take a second and talk to you today about changing directions. I know that on my page and in my blog I talk a lot about finding your purpose and finding healthy and finding balance, and although I do think that that's really great and really important, and a lot of us are working on finding that, one of the assumptions that I think can easily be made is that most people who are finding themselves or trying to find themselves are somewhat of a blank slate when they're looking, meaning that they, like if our destiny is to be written like a checklist on a board, if we haven't ever really found ourselves, for the most part, that destiny is unwritten. We haven't actually written down anything there, and we're still looking for things to put on our destiny checklist to say, yes, this is who I am, this is what I am, this is what I believe in, this is what I feel that I've been gifted with. We're looking for things to add to our checklist. Well, one of the things that I had occurred to me today, and this is something that I want to talk to you about, was that what happens if you are going through life and you feel really lost, but when you look at your destiny checklist, there's already like 50 things on there. What happens if you've spent the last 20 years of your life working to add all of these things to this destiny checklist, only to find out that, hey, I'm really miserable, and it's because of all this stuff that I put on this list already. I thought that I knew who I was. I thought that I knew that what I had put on there was the right thing. What happens when you get halfway through your life and you realize, I shouldn't have put that stuff on there, or the stuff that I was working on so hard to add to this checklist was just not the right stuff. I think that when we try and approach finding our purpose and finding ourselves and finding healthy and finding balance, assuming that our checklist is blank, I would almost think that it's easier than if you already have a list full of stuff that you've been spending your time and effort and money on to try and add to this list. When you're working from an already established standpoint, change is a lot harder than if you haven't made any decisions at all. I think that it would be. And as I'm saying, this is a really deep thought. This is random stuff that I think about all the time. I don't know. No wonder the mister goes crazy listening to me go off on wild tangents. Anyways, the reason that I bring this up is that somebody that I know is going through a really rough time right now. I think technically this is, by definition, midlife crisis. When you get partway through your life and you realize that, oh, holy shit, none of this stuff that I've been working on is the right stuff. I should be doing something else instead. It's this crisis mode where you realize you've wasted all this time, you don't have that much time left, and you're in the wrong place and you're doing the wrong thing. I think that as a society, we dismiss midlife crisis. And this feeling, we dismiss it because we think, oh, it's just midlife crisis. You're just realizing that you're going to die someday. And I do think that that might be part of it. But I also think that for a lot of people, I mean, we are cogs in a machine. We are trained not to really think outside the box. And so we start these jobs, you're supposed to graduate from high school, so we do, and you're supposed to graduate from college, so we do, and you're supposed to have a job that pays, and so we get one, but never do we actually stop and think about what it is that we really want, or why it is that we really want it. And I think that, sorry, my hand's getting tired. Don't tell the mister that I'm driving with one hand so I can do this on my pad thingy, because he'll be really mad. I think that it's really important that depending on where you're at in your life, you consider the fact that the stuff that you've been working on, or that you just consider the things that you've been working on. I think it's really important that you do that. If your life's destiny list is halfway full of stuff that you've spent the first 35 or 40 years of your life accumulating, it's a lot harder to change course when you've already put in all this time. So I think that one of the things you need to consider, if that's the case, is that when you are 40 years into a certain direction and then you decide that you feel like you need to change course, you need to give yourself a little bit of time to grieve. Because regardless of whether or not the purpose that you've been headed towards for the last 40 years is the right one, whether or not it is a human entity or a figment of your imagination or a job promotion you've been shooting for or all this money that you're going to make doing this one thing later, you've been working really hard at it, and it has had your time and focus and attention for 40 years. And letting that go is a sad thing. I mean, it makes you feel lost and sad. And I think that giving yourself time to grieve is really important. I do think that people avoid making change in their lives because they don't realize that they are going to grieve what it is they're letting go of. You can't just switch directions and not feel sad that you've changed your plans. If I'm headed to Yellowstone and halfway to Yellowstone we decide to take a detour and go to a completely different city, I would be excited for the different city. I would still be sad that I didn't get to go to Yellowstone, and I would be thinking about it, and I would think, well, maybe someday later on we'll go do that. But there's this grief there, and I think that if we don't address that grief, it really is very limiting as to how we can progress. There is a legitimate need for that grief because it provides us with some closure. The 5 stages of grief, the last one is acceptance, and unless we go through the first 4, you can't get to the point where you accept that this is just the way that it's going to be. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it, I think that when we switch directions halfway through the race, we really need to be sure as to why we're doing it. And I think it helps us to get through the grieving process to understand why we were headed in the direction we were headed in the first place. Like, when I was younger, I was convinced that I was going to be the CEO of some multi-million-dollar, multi-level company and sit in the very tallest chair at the very head of the table and be surrounded by all of these people that I was able to lead. People that know me personally are going to say it's because they know that I wanted to be bossy, and that's not completely the truth. It's not about being a boss to me, it's about being a leader, and I was convinced that this is what I wanted to do, and so my entire professional career was bent on getting to the top of the food chain so that I could be in the big chair at the front head of the table. What I didn't realize, though, was, so then I got pregnant, and I had always committed that once I had my kid, I would quit working and stay home and raise my kids. And until I got pregnant, getting pregnant for me was the switching directions halfway through towards something else, because I hadn't considered the fact that, that means that I don't get to do this big thing over here, and that's a really emotional thing for me. The only way that I could get through that and make the change and make the decision happily without regret and without remorse is to recognize what it was about that big chair at the head of the table of this big company that I wanted so much. And after a lot of thought, I identified that it wasn't so much that I was the one in charge. It was the fact that I would be sitting at the head of a table and there would be 15 people sitting around it, and they would all be under my wings. It was a nurturing thing. I wanted to be the one that they came to when they needed help. I wanted to be the one that they talked to about their problems, and that I was there to help them and fix things and make their lives better. As a leader, I really feel that that's a big part of leadership. So once I swapped out that head table with employees around it in my head with a hugely long dining room table full of kids and spouses and grandkids, I felt exactly the same way about having kids and staying at home than I would have felt if I had been the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. Identifying what it was about the success that I had, the vision of success in my mind, identifying what it was about that was specifically successful, because we all define success in different ways. It allowed me to find that success in this other thing that I was working on now, instead of the thing that I thought that I wanted, if that makes any sense at all. So I just want you guys to think about this. I know that we talk about weight loss and getting healthy and making life changes and finding your purpose. And that for a lot of you, it's a difficult thing to do because you've had your head and your sight and your focus on this one thing, like over there, for a really long head gesturing, because I don't have two hands. Head gesturing over there. You've had your sight and your focus on this thing over there for a really long time, and now you're trying to go over there, but it's really scary because you've never gone over there, and it's really sad because you're going to be leaving this other thing on that side, but it's really, and you're not really sure that this thing over here is going to make you happy. But if you can identify what it was about the original thing that would have made you happy in the first place, and then find that in your new venture, it will ease the transition a little bit and make it a lot more easy for you to find joy and hope in the transition. So, very wordsy. I'm probably going to have to re-record this and do it over without all of the other distractions, or not, because being vulnerable and making mistakes is part of life, right? There's those people that do those blogs and they'll talk all the way through them and they won't make any mistakes at all. I don't know how they do that. I can't do that. But it was good to talk to you guys. I hope that this finds you well. Please comment or ask questions or send me emails or whatever it is that you need from me. I'll do my best to give it to you. Also, I have a new website coming out. It's called Depth. And specifically, it talks about stuff like this, how to find depth with yourself and depth with other people so that you can make better relationships, so that you can use those relationships to make better change. So opt into that. It's ErinLarvik.com. It's scheduled to launch in the next month or two. But that's it. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.